Do you remember those dreamy desserts from the 1960s? The ones you'd spot in church cookbooks or on grandma's table? Back then, a little sugar, a splash of canned fruit, and a dash of love could turn any night into a celebration. From mile-high chiffon pies to pudding that wobbled just right, these sweets were the highlight of every gathering. Somewhere along the way, they slipped off our menus, but their charm is far too good to forget. Baked Alaska. Baked Alaska was the undisputed showstopper of 1960s dinner parties, the kind of dessert that made guests sit up straighter and lean in for a better look. Picture it, a neat dome of ice cream perched on a cushion of sponge cake, all blanketed in dramatic swirls of meringue. Then, as if breaking every law of common sense, it was slid into a blazing hot oven. Minutes later, it emerged golden and toasty on the outside, perfectly frozen on the inside, like dessert's answer to a magic trick. In the world of mid-century home entertaining, this was high theater served on a plate. Though its roots trace back to 19th century France and later became a showcase dish in American fine dining, the 1960s turned Baked Alaska into a suburban legend. Freezers were now a common household appliance, and ice cream had gone from rare indulgence to everyday treat. Combine that with a culture obsessed with hosting elaborate dinner parties, and you had the perfect stage for a dessert that defied logic. It wasn't just food, it was a statement. The ingredient list was surprisingly humble. A base of sponge cake, store-bought, was quietly acceptable. A firm block of ice cream, and a cloud of meringue whipped from egg whites, sugar, and a pinch of cream of tartar for stability. The real trick was the timing. Assemble quickly, seal every inch in meringue, and slide it into an oven hot enough to caramelize the outside before the ice cream could think about melting. When done right, it sliced cleanly to reveal contrasting layers. The warm, crisp meringue, the tender cake, and the shock of cold, creamy ice cream. Baked Alaska wasn't just about taste, it was about spectacle. Guests gasped when it appeared from the oven, marveled as the knife broke through the meringue, and smiled at the unexpected sensation of hot meeting cold. It made a hostess look fearless and a little glamorous, as if she'd just returned from a Parisian cooking school instead of the local supermarket. Today, Baked Alaska has drifted out of the home kitchen, living mostly in retro-themed restaurants or special occasion menus. But its bold spirit still calls to those willing to trade convenience for a few minutes of pure dessert drama. After all, why shouldn't sweets steal the spotlight? Ambrosia salad. Ambrosia salad was the pastel crown jewel of every 1960s potluck table. A dessert so sweet and whimsical it could only have been dreamed up in the age of Tupperware and church socials. The name itself promised something heavenly. Ambrosia, the food of the gods. But what landed on your plate was pure mid-century Americana. A cloud of whipped topping, folded with canned fruit. Cocktail, shredded coconut, pastel mini marshmallows, and maybe a handful of maraschino cherries for flair. Served chilled in a big glass bowl, it wasn't just a dessert. It was a social event in spoonable form. The dish had older Southern roots, where fresh oranges, pineapple, and coconut were once layered with sugar and cream for holiday tables. But in the 1960s, convenience reigned supreme, and ambrosia adapted to the pantry. fresh fruit became canned, predictable in flavor, forgiving in shelf life, and hand-whipped cream gave way to Cool Whip, which could survive the journey from grocery store to picnic table without deflating. This evolution made it perfect for busy homemakers who needed a guaranteed crowd pleaser with minimal fuss. Making ambrosia salad was blissfully simple. Drain your cans, fold everything into a mountain of sweet creaminess, and let it chill until the marshmallows softened, just enough to melt into the mix. The real beauty was in its forgiving nature. Measurements were more handful than cup, and substitutions were encouraged. Didn't have pineapple? Toss in peaches? Not enough marshmallows? No one ever complained about extra coconut. Ambrosia salad wasn't just about taste. It was about community. You found it at family reunions, holiday dinners, and every church basement gathering from coast to coast. It was the edible equivalent of small talk, light, sweet, and uncontroversial. Everyone took a scoop, even if just to be polite, and more often than not, they went back for seconds. Today, ambrosia is often dismissed as kitsch, a relic of the open a can and call it cooking era. But its charm lies in that very simplicity. It was dessert for the masses, no oven required. And it carried with it the joy of gathering, sharing, and not overcomplicating the sweet things in life. In a world of over-designed, Instagram-perfect treats, maybe there's still room for a big, unapologetic bowl of ambrosia. Jello mold desserts. In the 1960s, nothing said hostess with the mostest, quite like a shimmering, wobbly Jello mold taking center stage on the buffet table. It wasn't just dessert, it was sculpture. The era's love affair with gelatin came from a mix of convenience, creativity, and a little competitive flair. With endless flavors, bright colors, and the magic of refrigeration, Jello molds became the ultimate canvas for mid-century imagination. You could suspend anything in that jewel-toned jelly: fruit, nuts, coconut, even the occasional layer of whipped cream, turning it into a masterpiece that jiggled proudly in the spotlight. The roots of gelatin desserts went back to the Victorian age, when they were a sign of wealth and skill. But by the mid-20th century, the process had been democratized thanks to packaged Jello powder. Suddenly, the average homemaker could whip up a fancy molded dessert in minutes. And because it's set in the fridge instead of the oven, it was perfect for summer picnics, church suppers, or dinner parties where the oven was already occupied by a roast. Preparation was straightforward but oddly ceremonial. You'd dissolve the powder in boiling water, stir in the cold, then fold in your chosen mix-ins: canned pineapple, mandarin oranges, maraschino cherries. For the ambitious, there were layered creations. Pour one flavor in, let it set, then add another, creating stripes as perfect as a barber pole. The crowning touch came when you unmolded it onto a serving plate, praying it would slide out in one smooth, triumphant motion. There was a certain joy in these desserts beyond taste. They were playful, a little absurd, and endlessly adaptable. Children loved the bright colors. Adults admired the creativity. It was a dish that could lean fancy or folksy, depending on the mold and the mix-ins. Today, Jello molds have largely vanished from everyday entertaining, dismissed as relics of an overly processed food era. But they still hold a certain retro magic. They remind us of a time when dessert didn't have to be artisanal to be adored, when a little wiggle on the table brought a smile to everyone's face. In a way, they were the Instagram showpieces of their time, only no filter required. Pineapple upside-down cake. Pineapple upside-down cake was the sunny, golden promise of 1960s baking, a dessert that brought the tropics to the suburbs, no passport required. It arrived at bake sales, potlucks, and Sunday dinners looking like a work of edible art. Rings of canned pineapple arranged in perfect symmetry, each crowned with a bright red maraschino cherry, all nestled in a buttery caramel glaze. Flip it out of the pan and you had a cake that was as much a spectacle as it was a treat, its glossy top practically glowing under the kitchen light. While the dessert's roots went back to the early 20th century, it truly found its fame in the post-war years. Canning technology had made tropical fruit an affordable pantry staple, and the 60s homemaker knew how to make the most of it. Pineapple brought both color and a hint of exotic flair, while the upside-down technique added just enough drama to impress guests. There is no need for frosting or elaborate decoration. The cake dressed itself in its own caramelized crown. Making one was as straightforward as it was satisfying. You'd melt butter and brown sugar in the bottom of a skillet or cake pan. Arrange the pineapple slices and cherries like a mosaic. Then pour a simple batter over the top. As it baked, the sugar bubbled and mingled with the fruit juices, seeping into the cake above. The real magic happened after it came out of the oven, the flip. One swift motion, a held breath, and the pan lifted to reveal a perfect, glistening pattern. It was part baking, part performance. This cake carried more than just flavor. It brought a sense of occasion. It was often served warm, with its caramel still sticky and fragrant, the fruit tender and sweet. Families cut generous wedges, and there was always that quiet moment of appreciation before the first bite. Today, pineapple upside-down cake has slipped into the realm of nostalgia, often spotted at retro-themed gatherings or in the pages of vintage cookbooks. But its charm endures. It's proof that a dessert doesn't need complexity to be memorable. Just a little fruit, a little sugar, and the courage to turn the whole thing upside down. Banana pudding with vanilla wafers. Banana pudding with vanilla wafers was pure comfort in a casserole dish. The kind of dessert that didn't need an introduction because its smell alone could pull everyone into the kitchen. In the 1960s, it was a staple of family gatherings, potlucks, and Sunday suppers. Layers of ripe banana slices, creamy custard or pudding, and those iconic vanilla wafers that softened into cake-like pillows as the whole thing chilled. Served in a big glass dish, or sometimes portioned into parfait glasses. It wasn't flashy, but it was the kind of dessert people asked for by name. The roots of banana pudding went back to the turn of the century, when bananas first became widely available in the United States. By the mid-20th century, the addition of store-bought vanilla wafers turned it into a true Southern-inspired classic that spread far beyond its regional borders. In the 60s, when convenience was king, instant pudding mixes made the process even easier, allowing busy homemakers to whip it together in minutes without standing over a stovetop. But the traditional version, with homemade custard thickened on the stove, still had its devoted fans. Making it was as much about the layering as it was about the flavor. You'd line the bottom of a dish with vanilla wafers, add a layer of bananas, then spoon over a thick blanket of custard. Repeat until the dish was full, then finish with more wafers or a flourish of meringue or whipped cream on top. As it chilled in the fridge, the magic happened. The wafers absorbed the custard's moisture, turning tender without losing all their shape. blending perfectly with the banana's sweetness. Banana pudding carried a sense of warmth and generosity. It wasn't meant to be delicate or fussy. It was meant to be scooped generously, often with seconds encouraged. It was the dessert you made when you wanted to feed a crowd without breaking the bank, and it always felt like a gesture of care. Today, you still see banana pudding in southern diners and nostalgic bakeries, but at many modern tables, it's been replaced by trendier sweets. Still, one spoonful of the real thing can transport you back to a simpler time, where dessert tasted like home and nobody counted the calories. Baked custard. Baked custard was the quiet achiever of the 1960s dessert table. Humble in appearance, but deeply satisfying in a way only the simplest recipes convey. There were no towering layers, no glossy frostings, no wild colors. Instead, it offered a soft, silky texture, a gentle sweetness, and the kind of flavor that came from just a handful of basic ingredients: milk, eggs, sugar, and a whisper of vanilla. In an era when convenience foods were on the rise, baked custard felt timeless, a link to the generations of home cooks who had made it before. Its origins stretched back centuries, but by the mid-20th century, baked custard was still holding its own among flashier newcomers. For many homemakers, it was the perfect make-do dessert, affordable, nourishing, and almost impossible to get wrong if you followed the slow and steady method. It could be served warm from the oven on a chilly evening, or chilled for a lighter treat on a summer night, often topped with a sprinkle of nutmeg for that extra touch of comfort. The preparation was an exercise in patience. Milk was gently heated, eggs and sugar whisked together until smooth. Then the two were combined slowly to avoid curdling. The mixture was poured into ramekins or a baking dish, set into a pan of hot water, and baked until just set in the center. The water bath kept the heat even, coaxing the custard into its signature velvety texture. There were no shortcuts, no gimmicks, just careful attention and the reward of a dessert that seemed to melt on the tongue. Baked custard was more than just a sweet ending. It carried a sense of care. It was often served to children, the elderly, or anyone recovering from illness, seen as both gentle and nourishing. In many homes, it was a way of saying without words, "I made this just for you." Today, baked custard has quietly slipped from many modern menus, overshadowed by flashier confections. But those who still make it know its magic, the way a spoon sinks into that creamy surface, the comfort it brings in its unpretentious simplicity. Sometimes, the most memorable desserts are the ones that whisper instead of shout. Charlotte Russe. Charlotte Russe was the kind of dessert that made a 1960s hostess feel positively elegant, even if she'd assembled it in the middle of a busy Saturday afternoon. It had an air of old-world sophistication, whipped cream and custard nestled inside a wall of lady fingers. Yet it was surprisingly approachable for the home cook. Served chilled in a glass dish or unmolded onto a cake stand, it looked like something from a French patisserie, the kind of sweet that could make even the most ordinary dinner party feel like an occasion. Its origins were far older, dating back to 19th century Europe, where versions appeared in the grand dining rooms of Russia, England, and France. By the time it reached mid-century America, the Charlotte Russe had evolved into a dessert of convenience without losing its charm. Lady fingers could be purchased pre-made at the grocery store. Instant gelatin or pudding mixes could stand in for labor-intensive custards. And whipped cream came from the can if you were pressed for time. Yet despite these shortcuts, the result still felt indulgent. Assembly was part of the fun. The cook would line the sides and bottom of a mold or deep dish with lady fingers, their golden edges standing like neat little soldiers. Then came the filling. Light, airy whipped cream, sometimes folded with fruit, gelatin, or custard, poured in until it reached the top. Once chilled, the dessert held its shape beautifully, ready to be sliced in wedges that revealed the delicate architecture within. Charlotte Russe wasn't just a dessert, it was a mood. It spoke of refinement, of care taken not just in flavor, but in presentation. Guests would admire it before the first bite, often asking for the recipe, as if such elegance must require some secret technique. The taste was gentle and creamy, the lady fingers softening just enough to meld with the filling. Today, Charlotte Russe is a rarity outside of vintage cookbooks and retro-themed bakeries, but its allure hasn't faded. In an era of rustic crumbles and deconstructed desserts, it reminds us of a time when presentation mattered just as much as taste, and when a hostess could win over a crowd with little more than cream, cookies, and a bit of imagination. Grasshopper pie. Grasshopper pie was the cool, minty showpiece of the 1960s dessert world, a playful nod to the era's fascination with cocktails and color. Inspired by the grasshopper cocktail, a sweet, mint-flavored drink popular in supper clubs, this pie brought the same fresh, pastel green charm to the dessert table. With its smooth, creamy filling and crumbly chocolate cookie crust, it was as much about style as it was about taste. Served chilled and often garnished with whipped cream or chocolate shavings, grasshopper pie managed to look sophisticated while still winking at its own sense of fun. The pie's popularity blossomed during a time when gelatin-based fillings and no-bake desserts were all the rage. Homemakers loved it because it was glamorous without being complicated, and it made a perfect make-ahead dish for dinner parties. The signature mint flavor came from crème de menthe, while a splash of crème de cacao added a subtle chocolate note. Mixed into a base of whipped cream and sometimes softened marshmallows, the filling was silky and light, almost like a frozen mousse. The dark chocolate crust, often made from crushed chocolate wafers and melted butter, provided just the right amount of contrast in both flavor and texture. Making grasshopper pie felt like mixing a bit of grown-up indulgence with childlike delight. The crème de menthe gave it a playful pastel color that looked almost too pretty to eat. And there was a touch of sophistication in serving something with an actual cocktail pedigree. It was a dessert that didn't take itself too seriously, yet it still turned heads when carried to the table. At its heart, grasshopper pie captured the mid-century love of novelty. It was the kind of dessert people remembered because it was different. Cool instead of warm, colorful instead of plain, and just boozy enough to feel slightly decadent. Today, grasshopper pie is rarely seen outside of retro cookbooks or themed parties, but its charm is undeniable. It's a reminder of a time when desserts could be playful without apology, when a bright green slice on a plate was enough to make people smile. In an age of minimalist plating, maybe it's time we brought back a little minty drama. Prune whip. Prune whip was one of those 1960s desserts that quietly straddled the line between treat and health food, though it wore its wholesome nature with a bit of elegance. Light, airy, and softly sweet, it was made by pureeing stewed prunes into a smooth base and then folding in whipped egg whites to create a fluffy, cloud-like texture. Served chilled in glass dessert cups or as a filling for pie shells, it had a delicate, almost ethereal quality that belied the humble dried fruit at its core. The dessert's roots reached back to earlier decades, when prunes were celebrated for their nutritional value and digestive benefits. By the mid-20th century, prune whip was a familiar presence in cookbooks, particularly in the light dessert section. In an era before low-fat yogurt or protein bars, it was one of the few sweets you could serve with a straight face as good for you. The prunes provided natural sweetness and a rich depth of flavor, while the whipped egg whites gave the dish its trademark airiness. Making prune whip was a lesson in simplicity. Prunes were simmered gently in water until plump and tender, then blended into a velvety puree. Egg whites were beaten to glossy peaks with sugar, then carefully folded into the prune mixture, creating a mousse-like consistency. Some cooks added a dash of lemon juice for brightness or a sprinkle of cinnamon for warmth. The finished dessert was spooned into individual dishes and left to chill, its flavors mellowing and melding as it set. Prune whip may not have had the drama of a flaming baked Alaska or the jewel-toned appeal of a jello mold, but it carried a quiet sophistication. It was the kind of dessert that might be served after a formal luncheon or in the dining room of a well-appointed home, its understated appearance hiding the care that went into its preparation. Today, prune whip has all but vanished from the mainstream dessert table, often remembered only by those who grew up with it. Yet it remains a charming reminder that dessert doesn't always have to be decadent to be satisfying, and that sometimes the simplest sweets are the ones that linger longest in memory. Divinity candy. Divinity candy was the snow-white jewel of the 1960s holiday table. A confection so light and airy it seemed almost too delicate to touch. Made from little more than egg whites, sugar, and corn syrup, it earned its heavenly name from both its cloud-like texture and its melt-in-the-mouth sweetness. Often studded with chopped pecans or walnuts and topped with a dusting of powdered sugar, Divinity wasn't an everyday treat. It was reserved for special occasions, a labor of love that required patience, precision, and just the right weather. The roots of Divinity went back to the early 20th century, but it truly flourished in mid-century America when candy making was still a proud holiday tradition. In an age before candy thermometers were digital and foolproof, making Divinity was considered a bit of a kitchen challenge. The sugar syrup had to be boiled to the hardball stage, then poured in a slow, steady stream into stiffly beaten egg whites while the mixer whirred away. The transformation was almost magical. What began as a glossy, sticky mixture became a billowy mass that could be spooned into perfect little mounds. Part of Divinity's charm was its seasonality. It was most often made in the winter, not just because of Christmas, but because humidity was the enemy of candy making. On damp days, Divinity could refuse to set properly, slumping into sticky puddles instead of holding its airy shape. Families knew the drill. If the weather was dry and cool, it was time to make candy. Children would hover around the kitchen, waiting for permission to lick the spoons, while the grown-ups swapped stories and measured ingredients with the care of chemists. When it came to serving, Divinity was often arranged on holiday platters alongside fudge, peanut brittle, and sugar cookies, its pristine whiteness standing out like fresh snow. Each bite dissolved almost instantly, leaving behind the rich flavor of vanilla and the gentle crunch of nuts. Today, Divinity candy is less common, overshadowed by store-bought confections and simpler recipes. But for those who remember it, A single taste can bring back the glow of holiday lights, the sound of laughter in a busy kitchen, and the satisfaction of mastering a recipe that truly lived up to its name. Pineapple cream cheese pie. Pineapple cream cheese pie was a sunny, tropical slice of mid-century dessert heaven, the kind of recipe that could brighten even the most ordinary supper table. With its creamy, tangy filling and bursts of sweet pineapple, it was a charming blend of flavors that felt both indulgent and refreshingly light. In the 1960s and 70s, when canned fruit and no-bake desserts were at their peak popularity, this pie became a go-to choice for homemakers who wanted something impressive yet easy to prepare. The base was often a crumbly graham cracker crust, pressed into a pie pan and chilled until firm. This provided a sweet, buttery foundation that perfectly complemented the creamy filling. The filling itself was a smooth mixture of softened cream cheese, sugar, and sometimes a splash of lemon juice for brightness. Into this velvety base went crushed pineapple, usually drained from a can, though a bit of juice was often left behind to enhance the flavor and give the filling a luscious texture. The pineapple added both sweetness and a subtle tartness, creating a perfect balance with the richness of the cream cheese. For many home cooks, this was a no-bake dessert, relying on refrigeration to set the filling. Others preferred to bake the crust briefly for added sturdiness before chilling the assembled pie. A dollop of whipped cream on top, or a full, fluffy layer, was almost mandatory, and some recipes added a sprinkling of toasted coconut or chopped pecans for a bit of extra flair. The result was a dessert that looked like it belonged at a luncheon, church social, or summer picnic. What made pineapple cream cheese pie so beloved was its versatility. It was easy enough for a weeknight treat, yet elegant enough for a dinner party. It could be made ahead of time, freeing the hostess from last-minute stress, and it held up beautifully in the refrigerator for a day or two. Today, the pie may not be as common as it once was, but it still carries the charm of a vintage recipe that knows exactly what it wants to be. Sweet, creamy, and just tropical enough to make you imagine a gentle ocean breeze. One bite and you can taste the sunshine of a bygone era. Bavarian cream. Bavarian cream is one of those desserts that manages to feel both old-fashioned and timeless. A silky custard elevated with whipped cream and set with just enough gelatin to hold its elegant shape. Originating in Europe, it found its way into American kitchens during the early 20th century and enjoyed a particular heyday in the mid-century era when it was considered the height of sophistication for luncheons, weddings, and formal dinners. Light yet decadent, it was the kind of dessert that made guests feel special. The preparation began with a classic custard made by whisking together egg yolks, sugar, and milk over gentle heat until it thickened into a smooth, velvety base. The custard was then enriched with vanilla or sometimes a splash of liqueur, brandy, rum, or Grand Marnier for those who wanted a touch of extravagance. Gelatin, dissolved and cooled just enough to blend without clumping, was folded into the warm custard, ensuring that the dessert would hold its shape once chilled. The final flourish was the addition of softly whipped cream, folded in carefully so as not to deflate its airy texture. Once assembled, Bavarian cream was often poured into an ornate mold, the kind with fluted edges or intricate designs that would release a showpiece dessert once inverted. Sometimes it was flavored with fruit purees, strawberry, raspberry, or peach, or layered with sponge cake for an even grander presentation. When unmolded, It might be surrounded by fresh berries, drizzled with a glossy fruit sauce, or garnished with delicate curls of chocolate. Part of Bavarian cream's charm in the mid-century kitchen was its ability to bridge the gap between casual and formal. It required some skill and patience, but it could be made ahead of time, freeing the hostess from fuss during the meal. It also kept well in the refrigerator, making it a practical choice for events where multiple dishes needed to be prepared in advance. While it's not as common on modern dessert menus, Bavarian cream remains a classic for those who appreciate the art of a well-made custard. Each spoonful is a reminder of a time when presentation was as important as flavor, and desserts were crafted to delight both the eye and the palate. Apple Brown Betty. Apple Brown Betty is a humble yet deeply satisfying dessert that has been warming kitchens and hearts for generations. With roots tracing back to colonial America, it became a staple in frugal households where nothing, especially bread, went to waste. Unlike pies or crisps, the Brown Betty's charm lies in its simplicity. Layers of sweetened breadcrumbs or cubes alternated with tender, spiced apples, baked until the fruit is bubbling and the topping is golden brown. In many mid-century kitchens, this dessert was a thrifty weeknight treat, as well as a cozy choice for Sunday dinners. Homemakers would save the heels of bread or slightly stale slices, knowing they could be transformed into something delicious. The bread was often tossed with melted butter, sugar, and a hint of cinnamon or nutmeg before being layered with thinly sliced apples. A sprinkle of lemon juice might be added to balance the sweetness, and sometimes a splash of apple cider or water was poured over the top to keep the fruit moist during baking. As the Apple Brown Betty baked, the apples softened into a tender, fragrant filling, while the bread topping crisped into a buttery, caramelized crust. The aroma alone, warm cinnamon mingling with baked apples, was enough to draw the family into the kitchen, eager for dessert before it even came out of the oven. When served warm, it was often topped with a dollop of whipped cream, a scoop of vanilla ice cream, or even a drizzle of heavy cream for an extra touch of indulgence. Part of its enduring appeal is its adaptability. Any apple variety on hand could be used, from tart Granny Smiths to sweeter Golden Delicious, and the recipe could easily stretch to feed a crowd. It required no fancy equipment or delicate technique, just the kind of resourcefulness that defined much of home cooking in earlier eras. Today, Apple Brown Betty remains a quiet classic, not flashy or overly sweet, but rich in nostalgia. It embodies the idea that dessert doesn't have to be elaborate to be comforting. Each bite carries the warmth of the oven, the spice of cinnamon, and the simple pleasure of turning humble ingredients into something memorable. Coconut layer cake. Coconut layer cake is the kind of dessert that announces celebration the moment it appears on the table. Tall, white, and crowned with a snowy blanket of shredded coconut, it has long been a centerpiece for birthdays, weddings, Easter dinners, and holiday gatherings. Its origins in the American South gave it a reputation for both elegance and indulgence, and by the mid-20th century, it had become a beloved tradition in kitchens across the country. The beauty of a coconut layer cake lies not only in its striking appearance, but also in the tender, buttery crumb of the cake itself. Traditionally, it was made with layers of moist white or yellow cake, baked until just golden and cooled completely before assembly. The filling and frosting were often variations of a boiled frosting or a fluffy 7-minute icing. Light, sweet, and slightly sticky, perfect for catching and holding the coconut. In some recipes, the layers were spread with a rich coconut custard or pastry cream before being stacked, adding a luscious surprise between each slice. The star ingredient, of course, was the coconut. In earlier days, home cooks would crack and drain fresh coconuts, then painstakingly grate the meat by hand. By the mid-century, sweetened shredded coconut from a bag was a welcome convenience, making the dessert more accessible for busy homemakers without sacrificing flavor. Once the cake was frosted, handfuls of coconut were pressed onto every surface, creating its iconic, snowy finish. When sliced, a coconut layer cake revealed its beauty inside as well. Uniform layers of tender cake separated by creamy frosting, each bite offering a sweet balance of vanilla and coconut. Served with a cup of coffee or tea, it felt luxurious yet comforting, the kind of dessert that made guests linger just a little longer at the table. Coconut layer cake has a way of carrying tradition forward. Whether baked entirely from scratch or given a modern shortcut with box mix and ready-made frosting, it still delivers that same celebratory spirit. It's more than just a dessert, it's a showpiece, a conversation starter, and a sweet reminder that some recipes become classics because they never fail to bring joy. Icebox cake. The icebox cake is a dessert that perfectly captures the ingenuity of mid-20th century home cooking. A sweet treat born from convenience, creativity, and the marvel of the electric refrigerator. It's a no-bake wonder, assembled in layers and left to chill until the magic happens. Cookies or crackers soften into cake-like layers, melding with cream into something far more than the sum of its parts. The basic concept was simple, yet endlessly adaptable. The most classic version often used crisp chocolate wafer cookies stacked with sweetened whipped cream, each layer carefully smoothed before the next was added. Once the stack was complete, the whole creation was coated in more whipped cream, then tucked away in the refrigerator, called the ice box in the era before the term fridge became common. Over several hours, the cookies absorbed moisture from the cream, transforming into a tender, cake-like texture without ever seeing the inside of an oven. Homemakers quickly learned that the icebox cake could be made with whatever they had on hand. Graham crackers became a popular choice, layered with pudding, custard, or flavored cream for a different twist. Some added fruit between layers, bananas, strawberries, or canned pineapple, for a burst of freshness. In the summer months, when turning on the oven was unthinkable, this dessert became a staple for keeping gatherings sweet and stress-free. Its charm lay in the anticipation as much as the flavor. You couldn't eat it right away. It had to rest, giving the flavors time to mingle. By the time it was sliced, the once separate layers had become a single, harmonious dessert, soft, creamy, and just rich enough to feel indulgent. In its heyday, the icebox cake embodied modern convenience, showcasing the refrigerator as a must-have appliance in every home. It was easy enough for a novice cook, elegant enough for company, and endlessly forgiving. Even today, with countless dessert options available, there's something about the icebox cake that feels timeless. It's a reminder of an era when innovation didn't mean complication, and when the most memorable desserts often came together without so much as striking a match. Date nut roll. Date nut roll is one of those vintage sweets that feels like it came from a time when desserts didn't need frosting or fancy decoration to make an impression. Rich, dense, and naturally sweet, it was a treat that relied on pantry staples and a bit of patience, resulting in a confection that was equal parts candy and sliceable bread. In many homes, it was as much a holiday tradition as cookies or fudge, often appearing on platters alongside other homemade specialties. The heart of date nut roll was, of course, the dates, chopped and simmered until soft, releasing their caramel-like sweetness. Sugar was added to amplify the flavor, along with butter for richness and sometimes a splash of vanilla for warmth. The mixture was cooked until thick and glossy, filling the kitchen with an aroma that hinted at something special in the making. Once removed from the heat, chopped nuts, often walnuts or pecans, were stirred in, adding crunch and balancing the sweetness. What set date nut roll apart was its unique preparation. Instead of being poured into a pan, the warm mixture was spread onto a damp towel or wax paper, then rolled into a log shape. After chilling, it firmed up enough to be sliced into neat rounds, each bite offering a chewy, nutty, and deeply satisfying sweetness. Some cooks dusted the outside with powdered sugar or shredded coconut for a decorative finish, while others kept it plain and rustic. It was a dessert made for sharing, often wrapped in wax paper and given as a homemade gift during the holidays. Its long shelf life made it ideal for sending to friends or family far away, and its rich flavor meant that just a thin slice was enough to satisfy. Date nut roll belonged to a time when recipes traveled by word of mouth, handwritten cards, and clipped magazine pages. It wasn't flashy, but it had staying power, both literally and figuratively, earning its place in family recipe boxes for generations. Today, it's a nostalgic nod to simpler sweets, proof that a few humble ingredients, handled with care, can create something worth remembering. Lemon chiffon pie. Lemon chiffon pie is the kind of dessert that feels like a burst of sunshine on a plate. Light, airy, and tangy, it blends the richness of a creamy filling with the refreshing brightness of fresh lemon, creating a balance that's both indulgent and uplifting. Born in the mid-20th century, when chiffon pies were celebrated as the modern, elegant answer to heavier custard pies, it quickly became a favorite for spring and summer gatherings. The magic of lemon chiffon pie lies in its texture, a silky, mousse-like filling that's neither too dense nor too fluffy, held together by a tender crust. Traditionally, it starts with a crisp base, often made from buttery graham crackers or flaky pastry, offering a sturdy yet delicate contrast to the light filling. The lemon flavor comes from fresh juice and zest, giving the pie a bright, natural tartness that cuts through the sweetness. What made chiffon pies so innovative at the time was their preparation method. Instead of baking the entire pie, the filling was cooked on the stove top to thicken slightly, often with egg yolks, sugar, and gelatin for stability. The real secret, however, was folding in beaten egg whites or whipped cream, which transformed the filling into something ethereal. This airy mixture was then poured into the waiting crust and chilled until firm, making it as refreshing as it was beautiful. Served cold, lemon chiffon pie was a welcome treat on warm days, often crowned with the halo of whipped cream or delicate curls of lemon zest for a final flourish. Its pale yellow hue and delicate wobble hinted at the care that went into making it, each slice offering a cloud-light bite with a tangy finish that lingered pleasantly. In its heyday, this pie represented a shift in American home baking toward lighter, more sophisticated desserts, the kind that graced ladies' luncheons and holiday tables with equal ease. Today, while it's less common than it once was, lemon chiffon pie remains a nostalgic classic. It's a dessert that reminds us of the charm in balancing flavor and texture, of the joy in something that feels both indulgent and refreshing. A true taste of sunshine that never really goes out of style. Rice pudding. Rice pudding is one of those humble, comforting desserts that feels like a warm embrace in a bowl. It's simple, unpretentious, and has been loved in kitchens around the world for centuries, each culture adding its own twist. In America, it became a staple of frugal yet satisfying home cooking, often appearing as a way to transform leftover rice into something sweet and nourishing. The beauty of rice pudding lies in its ability to take basic pantry staples, rice, milk, sugar, and eggs, and turn them into a creamy, indulgent treat. Traditionally, rice pudding begins with short or medium grain rice, which has enough starch to give the dish its signature velvety texture. The rice is gently simmered in milk, sometimes enriched with cream, until the grains are tender and the mixture thickens into a luscious custard. Sugar adds sweetness, while a pinch of salt brings out the flavors. A hint of vanilla is almost always present, though cinnamon and nutmeg often make an appearance, lending warmth and depth to each spoonful. Some versions are baked, producing a slightly firmer pudding with a delicate golden skin on top, while others are cooked entirely on the stovetop for a softer, creamier finish. Raisins are a frequent addition, plumped by the heat until they're juicy and sweet, though not everyone agrees on whether they belong, making it one of those friendly dessert debates passed down in families. Rice pudding's charm is not just in its taste, but in its versatility. Served warm, it feels hearty and soothing, perfect for cold evenings or as a cozy ending to a simple meal. Chilled, it becomes a refreshing treat, sometimes topped with a dollop of whipped cream or a sprinkle of toasted coconut. In the mid-20th century, it was a common sight at potlucks and church suppers, often made in large batches to serve a crowd. This dessert has endured because it speaks to the heart as much as the palate. It's a reminder that comfort doesn't have to be complicated, that the simplest ingredients can yield the richest satisfaction. A spoonful of rice pudding carries the warmth of home, the thrift of a resourceful cook, and the sweetness of tradition in every bite. Boston cream pie. Boston cream pie is one of those delightful desserts that tricks the ear as much as it charms the taste buds. Despite its name, it's not a pie at all, but a cake. A golden sponge split in two, layered with rich pastry cream, and crowned with a glossy chocolate glaze. Its origins trace back to the mid-19th century, when pie tins were more common than cake pans in American kitchens. Cakes baked in pie tins were often called pies, and the name simply stuck, giving us this sweetly deceptive classic. The dessert's birthplace is often credited to the Parker House Hotel in Boston, where in the 1850s, French-trained chef Saint-Zien created his elegant version. It quickly became a favorite in New England and eventually earned the honor of being named the official dessert of Massachusetts in 1996. Its appeal lies in the perfect marriage of textures and flavors, the airy lightness of the cake, the smooth cream filling, and the rich chocolate topping that provides just enough bittersweet contrast. Making a Boston cream pie from scratch is a labor of love. The sponge cake must be tender yet sturdy enough to hold the cream. The pastry cream, thick, silky, and infused with vanilla, requires gentle cooking to avoid curdling. Then comes the chocolate glaze, traditionally made with semi-sweet chocolate melted into cream, poured over the top so it drapes smoothly down the sides in an elegant curtain. When sliced, the layers reveal themselves like a promise kept. In mid-century America, Boston cream pie had an air of sophistication gracing the dessert tables of dinner parties and holiday gatherings. While boxed cake mixes and instant puddings eventually offered shortcuts, the homemade version remained the gold standard for those who valued the ritual as much as the result. Even today, a well-made Boston cream pie can feel like a special occasion all on its own. It's a dessert that bridges the gap between rustic tradition and refined indulgence, carrying with it the charm of a bygone era. Whether enjoyed in a hotel dining room, a family kitchen, or a cozy bakery, each bite delivers a little taste of Boston history. Sweet, smooth, and just decadent enough to linger in memory. Opera Cream Torte. The Opera Cream Torte is a dessert with a name as elegant as its presentation. A confection that feels at home in a refined tea room or as the grand finale to a special dinner. Originating from the Midwest, particularly Cincinnati, where opera creams have long been a local candy specialty, this cake transforms the silky, melt-in-your-mouth texture of those candies into a show-stopping layered creation. It's a dessert that whispers sophistication while still delivering the nostalgic comfort of a cream-filled treat. At its heart, the Opera Cream Torte is a study in balance. Layers of tender sponge or yellow cake are stacked with rich buttery cream that's sweetened just enough to be indulgent without overwhelming. The filling, inspired by the opera cream candy, is smooth and luscious, typically made from a base of butter, powdered sugar, cream, and sometimes a touch of vanilla or almond extract for depth. Between each layer, this cream is spread generously, creating the perfect contrast to the cake's light crumb. The torte's crowning glory is its glossy chocolate ganache or icing. Much like its candy counterpart, chocolate plays an essential role. Not too thick, but just enough to encase the torte in a thin, sumptuous layer that cracks ever so slightly under a fork. When cut, the clean stripes of cake and cream give it a polished look, making it as beautiful to the eye as it is pleasing to the palate. In the mid-20th century, desserts like the Opera Cream Torte were symbols of effort and elegance, often served at milestone celebrations, weddings, and anniversaries. Home bakers who took on the challenge of making one did so with pride, knowing the result would draw appreciative murmurs around the table. The cake's name perhaps nods to the sophistication of opera itself, grand, dramatic, and meant to be savored slowly. Today, the Opera Cream Torte remains a beloved specialty in certain regions, though it's far less common than simpler layer cakes. Its allure lies in its ability to feel both old-fashioned and timeless. A dessert that invites you to pause, take a small forkful, and enjoy the way the sweet cream and chocolate mingle before the next bite. It's a quiet kind of luxury, one worth lingering over. Cranberry upside-down cake. Cranberry upside-down cake is a dazzling dessert that brings together the tart sparkle of cranberries with the rich comfort of a tender, buttery cake. Much like its more famous cousin, the pineapple upside-down cake, this beauty is baked with its fruit topping at the bottom of the pan, only to be flipped dramatically onto the serving plate, revealing a glossy, jewel-toned crown. It's the kind of dessert that can brighten the darkest winter table, its ruby red sheen making it as much a feast for the eyes as for the taste buds. The magic begins with the cranberries. Fresh or frozen, they're tossed with sugar to tame their natural tartness and coax out their juices. Often, a touch of orange zest or cinnamon is added to deepen the flavor, creating a fragrant topping that's both bright and cozy. These berries are then spread over a generous layer of melted butter and brown sugar in the baking pan. As the cake bakes, the sugar caramelizes, mingling with the cranberry juices to create a luscious, tangy sweet glaze. The cake batter itself is typically a simple yet indulgent affair, light, tender, and buttery, with just enough richness to balance the cranberry's acidity. Once the batter is poured over the prepared fruit, the pan goes into the oven where the magic happens. The cake rises and turns golden while the cranberries soften and soak into the caramel layer beneath. When baked to perfection, it's time for the nerve-wracking but thrilling inversion, flipping the cake onto a platter to reveal the glossy, red-topped masterpiece. In mid-century kitchens, cranberry upside-down cake was a clever way to celebrate seasonal produce, especially in autumn and winter when fresh fruit choices were limited. It often appeared at holiday tables, offering a welcome pop of color and a dessert that felt special without being overly fussy. Served warm, perhaps with a dollop of whipped cream or a scoop of vanilla ice cream, cranberry upside-down cake delivers a perfect balance: sweet, tart, soft, and slightly sticky. It's a dessert that reminds us that sometimes the simplest flips can feel like a grand performance, turning humble ingredients into something that deserves a round of applause. Caramel flan. Caramel flan is a dessert that feels like a little piece of elegance on a plate, even though its ingredients are as simple as can be. Known for its silky custard base and glossy amber topping, this treat has roots in European tradition, but found a warm welcome in American kitchens, especially during the mid-20th century when home cooks sought recipes that looked impressive but didn't require elaborate equipment. The magic of caramel flan lies in its contrast. Cool, creamy custard paired with a bittersweet caramel sauce that cascades down its sides when unmolded. The process begins with sugar, which is gently melted over heat until it turns into a golden brown syrup. Timing is everything here. Too pale and the caramel will lack depth. Too dark and it risks bitterness. This molten amber is poured into the bottom of a baking dish or individual ramekins, hardening into a thin, shiny layer that will later transform into the dessert's crown. The custard mixture is a simple blend of eggs, milk, and sugar, often flavored with vanilla for a warm, inviting aroma. In some variations, sweetened condensed milk or evaporated milk is added, lending extra creaminess and a hint of nostalgia from the pantry staples of the 1950s and 60s. Once the custard is poured over the set caramel, the whole dish is baked in a gentle water bath, ensuring even cooking and preventing the custard from curdling. When fully set, the flan is chilled, allowing the flavors to meld and the texture to become luxuriously smooth. The most dramatic moment comes at serving time. The dish is inverted onto a plate, releasing the caramel so it glides over the custard in a rich, glossy sheet. What was once the base now becomes the star, coating each bite in sweet, slightly bitter perfection. In its heyday, caramel flan was a go-to for dinner parties, offering a touch of sophistication without straining the grocery budget. It remains timeless today, a reminder that true elegance often comes from simplicity. One spoonful delivers the gentle wobble of custard and the deep, buttery sweetness of caramel, a pairing that proves some classics never need improvement. Queen of puddings. Queen of Puddings is a regal name for a dessert that is as comforting as it is elegant. With roots in British tradition, this layered creation has long been cherished for turning humble ingredients into something fit for a special occasion. At its heart, it is a clever combination of a breadcrumb-thickened custard, a bright layer of jam, and a billowy crown of meringue baked to golden perfection. In the mid-20th century, when resourcefulness was a hallmark of home cooking, this pudding found its place in American kitchens as a charming nod to old-world elegance. The base begins with milk, gently heated, and infused with butter, sugar, and a touch of vanilla, then poured over fresh breadcrumbs. This simple method not only thickens the custard, but also gives the dessert a subtle, homey texture that sets it apart from smooth puddings. Once the egg yolks are whisked in, the mixture is baked until just set, forming the sturdy yet tender foundation of the dish. The middle layer is where the flavor brightens, a spread of raspberry or strawberry jam, its jewel-like color and tangy sweetness cutting through the richness of the custard. This fruity ribbon offers both visual appeal and a burst of flavor, making every spoonful a balanced bite of creamy and tart. The grand finale is the meringue. Egg whites are beaten until billowy, sweetened with sugar to hold glossy peaks, and then spooned or piped over the jam-topped custard. As it bakes, the meringue puffs slightly, turning a delicate golden brown on the outside while staying soft and marshmallowy within. When brought to the table, Queen of Puddings has a presence that feels both nostalgic and celebratory. The spoon breaks through the cloud of meringue, revealing the bright jam and pale custard beneath, a trio of textures and flavors that work in harmony. In its heyday, it was the sort of dessert a hostess could proudly serve without expensive ingredients, relying instead on skill and care. Today, it remains a testament to the beauty of thrift and tradition, a dessert that proves even the simplest pantry staples can be elevated to something worthy of its royal title. Floating Island. Floating Island is one of those desserts that manages to be both ethereal and indulgent, a combination that has kept it in the repertoire of classic cooks for generations. Originating from the French dessert île flottante, it became a showpiece in American dining rooms during the mid-20th century, especially for hostesses eager to impress with something that looked far more complicated than it was. The dish's magic lies in its contrasting elements. Soft, airy meringues floating on a pool of silky vanilla custard sauce, creating a presentation as striking as it is delicious. The custard base, known as crème anglaise, begins with milk gently heated with sugar and infused with vanilla, creating a fragrant canvas. Egg yolks are whisked in carefully, the mixture stirred over low heat until it thickens just enough to coat the back of a spoon. This sauce is the anchor of the dessert, rich yet delicate, and it's poured into shallow bowls or a serving dish where the meringues will later rest like clouds drifting over a golden sea. The meringues, made from stiffly beaten egg whites sweetened with sugar, are what give Floating Island its name. Traditionally, they are poached gently in simmering milk, a method that sets them into tender, pillowy shapes without collapsing. Each island is then lifted out with care, drained, and placed atop the custard. Some cooks, especially in the 1950s and 60s, preferred to bake the meringues instead, producing a slightly firmer texture and a faint golden tint. For extra flourish, a drizzle of caramel or a scattering of toasted almonds might be added, giving a touch of color and crunch. The contrast of the cool, creamy custard with the light, sweet meringue makes each bite melt almost instantly on the tongue. In its heyday, Floating Island was the kind of dessert that could end a formal dinner party on an elegant note, the sort of recipe clipped from glossy magazines and tucked into well-loved cookbooks. Even today, it remains a reminder of a time when presentation mattered just as much as flavor, and when a dessert could be as much a conversation piece as it was a treat. It's a culinary illusion, light as air, yet luxuriously satisfying. Raspberry Fool. Raspberry Fool is one of those desserts whose charm lies in its simplicity, yet it delivers a burst of flavor and elegance that rivals far more complicated confections. With origins in 17th century England, this sweet has stood the test of time, adapting beautifully to American kitchens where fresh berries are treasured summer staples. At its heart, a raspberry fool is nothing more than pureed fruit, folded into sweetened whipped cream. But the result is so light, creamy, and vividly flavored that it feels like a small luxury in every spoonful. The preparation begins with raspberries, plump, ripe, and at their peak of sweetness. They are gently cooked with just enough sugar to draw out their juices and intensify their natural tartness. Then strain to remove seeds, leaving behind a smooth, jewel-toned puree. Some cooks like to add a splash of liqueur, such as Chambord or Grand Marnier, for subtle depth, while others keep it pure and fruit-forward, allowing the raspberries to shine on their own. The other essential element is the whipped cream, beaten until it's soft and billowy. The art of making a fool lies in the folding, gently swirling the fruit into the cream to create a marbled effect, or fully blending it for a consistent pale pink cloud. Either way, the goal is to maintain the airy texture while infusing the cream with the raspberry's bright, tangy flavor. Traditionally served chilled in individual glasses or dessert dishes, Raspberry Fool offers a delightful contrast between the cool creaminess and the tart fruit. It can be garnished with fresh raspberries, mint leaves, or even a crisp cookie on the side for added texture. In mid-century America, this dessert fit beautifully into the trend of easy yet impressive sweets, perfect for summer luncheons, garden parties, or as a refreshing ending to a heavier meal. Part of the appeal is its adaptability. The recipe can be prepared ahead of time, it requires no baking, and it works with other fruits just as well. Strawberries, blackberries, even rhubarb. But raspberries bring a special vibrancy and color that make the dish feel festive. Raspberry Fool is proof that elegance in the kitchen doesn't require complexity, just fresh ingredients and a light, careful touch. Black Forest Cake. Black Forest cake, or Schwarzwälder Kirschtorte as it's known in its native Germany, is a showstopper of a dessert that combines layers of chocolate sponge cake with whipped cream, cherries, and the unmistakable aroma of Kirsch, a cherry brandy that gives the cake its signature depth. Emerging from the Black Forest region, where cherry trees grow in abundance, this cake has traveled far from its origins, becoming a beloved treat in bakeries and home kitchens around the world. In America, it found its popularity during the mid-20th century, when elaborate layer cakes were the pride of any hostess's table. The foundation of Black Forest cake is a tender, moist chocolate sponge, light in texture, yet rich in flavor. Once baked and cooled, each layer is brushed generously with Kirsch or cherry syrup, infusing the cake with a subtle boozy warmth. that mingles beautifully with the sweetness of the other elements. Between the layers, thick clouds of sweetened whipped cream are spread, dotted with juicy, dark cherries, often preserved in syrup to maintain their deep, wine-like flavor throughout the year. The assembly is part of the artistry. After stacking the cake with alternating layers of cream and cherries, the exterior is cloaked in more whipped cream, giving it a snowy, ethereal appearance. The sides are traditionally pressed with chocolate shavings or curls, adding both a decorative flourish and a bittersweet contrast to the cream. The top is crowned with a ring of piped cream rosettes, each topped with a glossy cherry, creating the cake's unmistakable signature look. While the traditional recipe insists on kirsch, adaptations over time have ranged from alcohol-free versions using cherry juice to variations incorporating chocolate ganache for added richness. In its heyday, the Black Forest cake was the centerpiece of celebrations, birthdays, anniversaries, and festive gatherings, its bold flavors and striking appearance ensuring it was as memorable to look at as it was to eat. What makes this cake endure is its balance. The airy chocolate layers, the tart bite of cherries, the lightness of cream, and the hint of liquor all come together in harmony. A slice of Black Forest cake is more than dessert. It's a layered celebration of flavor, tradition, and timeless European elegance brought to the home table. Peach cobbler. Peach cobbler is the kind of dessert that feels like a warm summer afternoon served in a baking dish. Rooted in early American cooking, it began as a practical adaptation by settlers who lacked the resources to make traditional pies. With no access to proper ovens or delicate pastry, they created a rustic dish by spooning fruit into a pan and topping it with a simple biscuit-like dough or batter, then baking it over an open fire. Over time, this humble invention evolved into one of the South's most treasured comfort foods, beloved for its golden, bubbling simplicity. At its heart, peach cobbler is a celebration of ripe, juicy peaches. Fresh fruit, when in season, is peeled, sliced, and lightly sweetened, sometimes with a splash of lemon juice or a pinch of cinnamon to enhance its natural flavor. In colder months, canned or frozen peaches step in, ensuring this dessert can be enjoyed year-round without losing its charm. The topping varies from region to region. Some favor a dense, biscuit-like crust that absorbs the peach juices as it bakes, while others prefer a lighter, cake-style batter that rises and browns beautifully over the fruit. As the cobbler bakes, the peaches soften into tender, syrupy perfection, their juices mingling with sugar to create a fragrant sauce that bubbles up around the edges of the crust. The top becomes golden and slightly crisp, offering a contrast to the warm, soft fruit beneath. The scent alone, a mixture of caramelizing sugar, butter, and peaches, is enough to draw people to the kitchen. Traditionally served warm peach cobbler is often paired with a scoop of vanilla ice cream or a dollop of whipped cream, the cold creaminess melting into the hot, sweet fruit in a perfect balance of temperatures and textures. It's a dessert meant for sharing, often baked in generous portions and brought to potlucks, Sunday dinners, and family reunions. Peach cobbler's enduring appeal lies in its straightforward nature. No fussy steps, no intricate decoration. Just honest, seasonal flavors baked to perfection. It's a dish that feels both nostalgic and timeless, capturing the essence of home cooking in every spoonful and reminding us that the simplest recipes often leave the deepest impression. Tapioca pudding. Tapioca pudding is one of those classic desserts that carries with it an air of quiet nostalgia. a reminder of kitchens where pots simmered slowly and desserts were made from pantry staples rather than instant mixes. Its roots stretch far beyond American tables, tracing back to the cassava plant, a tropical crop whose starchy roots are processed into the small, pearly granules we recognize as tapioca. These tiny pearls are what give the pudding its signature texture, a gentle chew that sets it apart from smoother custards and creams. The process of making tapioca pudding has always been a patient one. The pearls must first be soaked or simmered until they turn from opaque to translucent, swelling as they absorb liquid. Cooked gently in milk, sometimes with a touch of cream for richness, they thicken the mixture without the need for flour or cornstarch. Sugar is stirred in for sweetness, and eggs, added either directly to the pot or tempered to avoid scrambling, give the pudding a soft, custard-like body. A splash of vanilla is the final flourish, adding warmth and fragrance that deepen as the pudding cools. Served warm, tapioca pudding is comfort in a bowl, with the pearls suspended in a creamy base that's both soothing and satisfying. Chilled, it transforms into something lighter and refreshing, perfect for warm weather. Some cooks add spices like cinnamon or nutmeg, while others stir in bits of fruit or a ribbon of jam for contrast. For much of the 20th century, tapioca pudding was a fixture in American homes, school cafeterias, and diners. It was affordable, filling, and could be made from ingredients that kept well in the pantry, qualities that made it especially popular during lean times. Today, it's often seen as an old-fashioned treat, though it still holds a loyal following among those who grew up with its distinctive texture. Part of tapioca pudding's charm is its ability to bridge generations. Grandparents serve it to grandchildren, not as a novelty, but as a tradition, passing along both the recipe and the memory of it. In each spoonful, there's a quiet link to simpler days when dessert was made slowly, eaten slowly, and appreciated for the comfort it brought. Molasses cookies. Molasses cookies are the kind of treat that seem to wrap the kitchen in a hug the moment they start baking. Their deep, rich aroma is unmistakable. Warm spices mingling with the earthy sweetness of molasses, a fragrance that feels like it belongs to autumn afternoons and holiday gatherings. These cookies have a long history in American baking, rooted in the days when molasses was a common sweetener in every pantry, especially in New England, where it was used generously in everything from bread to baked beans. The dough for molasses cookies is simple yet hearty, built on flour, butter or shortening, sugar, and of course, molasses, which gives the cookies their signature dark color and chewy texture. A generous hand with the spices, ginger, cinnamon, and cloves, turns them from plain sweet biscuits into something deeply aromatic and comforting. Once mixed, the dough is often chilled to make it easier to roll into balls, which are then coated in sugar before baking. This sugar crust catches the oven's heat and crackles as the cookies expand, leaving them with a beautiful, crinkled surface that hints at the soft, spiced center beneath. Biting into a molasses cookie is a study in contrasts. The slight crunch of the sugared exterior gives way to a tender, almost cake-like interior, rich with spice and mellowed by the smooth sweetness of molasses. Some bakers prefer them soft and thick, almost like a small handheld cake, while others opt for thin, crisp edges that give a little snap when bitten. Either way, they pair beautifully with a glass of cold milk, a mug of coffee, or, best of all, a steaming cup of tea. Molasses cookies have remained a beloved staple, not just for their flavor, but for their timelessness. They are as welcome on a holiday cookie tray as they are in a lunchbox, or served warm from the oven on a rainy afternoon. They carry with them a certain old-fashioned charm, a reminder of kitchens where recipes were passed down by memory rather than written card, and where a batch of cookies could bring everyone to the table. In every bite, they offer a taste of tradition, familiar, comforting, and just sweet enough to keep you coming back for more. Millionaire pie. Millionaire pie is one of those no-bake desserts that feels like it was dreamed up on a sunny afternoon, equal parts indulgent and effortless. Despite its glamorous name, this pie is rooted in the humble, thrifty creativity of mid-century American kitchens, where a can of sweetened condensed milk, a tub of whipped topping, and a few canned fruits could be transformed into something worthy of company. Served straight from the refrigerator, it's cool, creamy, and bursting with a tropical sweetness that makes it just as welcome at a summer picnic as at a holiday buffet. The magic of millionaire pie lies in its texture and flavor contrast. A crumbly graham cracker crust forms the foundation, either homemade with crushed crackers and melted butter, or made even easier with a store-bought shell. Into this goes the filling, a luscious mixture of whipped topping and sweetened condensed milk, often brightened with a splash of lemon juice to cut through the richness. Crushed pineapple, well drained to avoid sogginess, brings a tangy sweet juiciness, while chopped pecans lend a nutty crunch that balances the softness of the filling. Some variations fold in maraschino cherries for a pop of color, shredded coconut for extra tropical flair, or even a handful of mini marshmallows for an unexpected chewy bite. Once the filling is poured into the crust, the pie is chilled until firm enough to slice, the refrigerator working its quiet magic to set all the flavors together. What's remarkable about millionaire pie is how it manages to feel both nostalgic and timeless. Its flavor calls back to an era when fancy often meant quick to prepare but pretty enough to serve to guests without fussing over the oven. The name itself is a wink. While it costs just a few pantry staples to make, it delivers the satisfaction of something far more decadent. Served in generous wedges, each forkful offers the creaminess of the filling, the crunch of the crust and pecans, and the brightness of pineapple all in perfect harmony. It's a dessert that invites second helpings without guilt, because it feels like pure joy on a plate. A little bit of sunshine, a little bit of sweetness, and a whole lot of charm. From candy-colored pies to custards and cobblers, these 1960s desserts are sweet slices of the past worth remembering. If this trip down memory lane made your mouth water, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can keep bringing you more delicious blasts from the past.